Okay, in this video tutorial I'm going to show how to start modeling a car. And so what we're going to use here is something that I call planar modeling, where we start with essentially a flat object and extrude it out almost like it's paper wrapping around the model. And we're going to start on the edges right here and bring it down to the center. And so this doesn't look like much now, but when you press 3 and you smooth it, you can start to see that you don't need a ton of geometry to start getting the vehicle body in order here. So I'm just going to hide this mesh and let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is, I know I called it planar modeling, but we're going to start with a cylinder. And the reason that I do that is I like to start around the wheel wells right here. And if you start with a cylinder, you'll just have a nice, perfectly circular object to start with, and it'll kind of keep your model from getting too wonky looking. So I'm going to create a cylinder, press F to focus in on this. And so for the subdivisions, I'm going to look at this from the top view. The subdivisions, one big philosophy I have here is just try to keep the model as simple as possible for as long as possible. So I'm going to go to the attribute editor, and the third tab, polycylinder 2, this should show up. And what we're going to do is the subdivision axis is at 20, and I want to move this down. The number that I recommend everyone use is 12 right here. You can use different numbers if you like, just don't choose an odd number, because it's going to be important that that line strikes through evenly right there. 12 is a really nice number. I think this has worked for me in the past, whether the car is stylized or realistic, it just seems to work really well. So next up, I'm going to add a subdivision cap right there. So just make that at 2, and we're ready to go. So I'm just going to tap spacebar, get off of this, and I'm going to delete a bunch of these faces. So I'm essentially going to delete all these faces here and half the faces here and just start deleting. So what I like to do is just going to press F in each of the frames. So I'm going to switch over to a side view, right click and go to face mode. And I'm just going to drag like that. So just delete all the bottom faces. You can see there's a little flat mark right there. And up here, before I start deleting any faces here, I want to right click, go to edge, double click this edge loop, press R to scale it, or you can press this button here. And I'm just going to scale it from the center yellow box right here. So don't scale it unevenly like that. So you just want to scale it from the center box, bring it up so that it's close to to the outside. Okay, so now we're ready to go back to face mode and start deleting again. So I'm just going to switch to the top view to delete half of these. And it doesn't matter which half you delete. I'm going to rotate this to kind of be in this wheel well, so I'm just going to delete these. And then I'm going to drag and select, and I'm going to delete the interfaces right there. So you should end up with something that looks like this. And if I go to object mode and I press 3, you can see, to smooth it or preview a smooth, you can see I have a nice rounded shape right there. And so first thing that I recommend doing is I'm going to duplicate this. And so I'll just call this rear wheel 1. And I'm going to duplicate this by selecting it, and you can press Control D or Command D if you're on a Mac, or you can go to Edit and then Duplicate. So, and I'll just call the second one front wheel. Press W and just kind of move that out of the way a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to model the rear wheel well over here. So I'm just going to move it over this way and start to kind of move it into position using my orthographic reference views. And so I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees over this way. So if you press E or rotate right here, and if I just clicked E just to kind of get it there, and then if I hold down J and I rotate it, it snaps it by 15-degree increments. And so that can get us to 90 degrees really nice and easy. I'll just go ahead and do the same up here. So hold J, and it's that yellow rotate slider for me right there. And I'll press W to kind of go back to the move tool. And so I'm just going to move this. I'm going to use the orthographic reference views to kind of get this into position. So I'm going to move it from the side position here. Press 3 to kind of preview what this is going to look like smoothed. right there. That's looking pretty good. And I'm gonna now look at it from the side view. And so one thing you'll see, or sorry, the top view. And one thing you'll see is this anchor point's way off right here. So we can fix that. So if you tap D, as in dog, that makes it so you can shift where the anchor point is. And so if I press D again, you can see I moved it closer. And if I tap D to move it again, I can now hold down V, as in vampire, and you can see that square turns into a circle, and I can just snap it right onto the object there. And so now when I rotate it or do whatever, it'll rotate from the anchor point that's on the object. So D to move the anchor point manually, and then if you want to snap it to a vertice on your object, that's V. And so I'm just going to move it in position there. And with the whole thing as an object, I'm just going to rotate it a little bit just to match up with the rest of my model. And so this is really important. This is something that people mess up a lot, is you want to line this up from the side view, check another angle, so the top view. So in order for this to work three-dimensionally, we need to do that every time we make a new decision, new extrusion, any of that. And so you can see here, if I check the front view, I should also be rotating this in just a little bit right there. So at least 2 angles and ideally 3 angles. You're kind of checking your work each time you make a new move. So that can be a new extrusion, whatever. So I've got it lined up from the side, I've got it lined up from the top, and I've got it lined up for the front. So we're in pretty good shape here. And so now I'll go back to the side view and I'll just make some minor adjustments. So I'll press 3 to preview what it'll look like smoothed. So you can see these vertices are just like a little bit off here. And I'll just leave it in smoothed mode while I just kind of make some small adjustments there. And notice that I'm trying to kind of keep the width consistent from here to here, just as I'm getting this started at first. And so for many of you, this is going to depend a lot how you proceed from here, depending on the car model that you're working with. And you can see on my model, there's not like a well-defined wheel well right there. You can see it's just very rounded. This is a very kind of rounded old school car. And I have, if I look at this model of the car, there's kind of a hard bevel that goes through this line right here. And so here's where things might start to kind of differ from what you're working with in small variations. But the main themes are going to stay consistent, where we're going to use as little geometry as possible. We're going to check different angles each time we move an edge or extrude. And if you do that, you'll kind of end up with some success. Also remember to press 3 to kind of go 1 and 3 to go back and forth between previewing your model regular and smoothed. Okay? And so here, to line up with this kind of edge right there, I'm going to start moving some vertices around just a little bit. And so my plan with this model is I'm going to kind of bring these up so that they line up with that edge. But then I'm going to start extruding out this way to kind of bring us out to, sorry, I'm going to start extruding this edge and this edge out this way to kind of cover that part of the car. And I'm going to extrude this edge and this edge out bring it out that way. And then we're going to extrude these edges out to start kind of wrapping around the car vertically. So let's start that to begin understanding this process. And we're going to introduce some new techniques along the way. So I'm going to get my modeling toolkit open here. So just make sure you're under the general or the modeling workspace here, modeling toolkit, and we're going to use some of these tools. So with these 2 edges selected, I'm now going to press extrude, and I'll just pull those up. And so remember, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to line these up in my side view first. And I'm not doing too many at the same time, right? I'm keeping it pretty limited. I've got 3 vertices to worry about here. So I've got it lined up on the side, and I can tell just looking at the geometry here, I'm going to want it to kind of curve just a little bit this way. So we have the side view. Let's now look at the top view. So we can see that this edge is going to connect up, and it's going to start almost connecting with the rear of the car. So let's look at the top view. And remember, I have those 3 vertices selected. So I think looking at this, they're probably going to line up pretty well with this line on the top of my car right here. And so again, these three vertices, they were here, and it was going to create, if I look at my perspective view, it's just going to be this flat object. And we need to move it in. We need to start making this three-dimensional here. So I'm bringing it in. You can do some tricks here. So for instance, if I want to flatten these out, I can press R, which is the scale tool. And right now, my scale is relative to the object. I want that to be relative to the world. Let's see here. I think, there we go. Yeah, so if I want to flatten these out, I can just press scale. And then this right left handle, if I scale it in, you can see I can get it all the way flat, or I can just start to flatten it out just a little bit with all of them selected at the same time. Let me make this relative to the world as well. I can rotate that way just to kind of line it up. And so now I'm just checking all my angles here. This is lining up pretty well from each of my orthographic views. So let me go back to my perspective view, and if I press 3, I can kind of see what this is going to look like once it's smoothed out. Okay, and so I want to go ahead and start introducing some new techniques soon. Let's see here, where can I, okay. So we'll do one more extrusion right here, and this time I'm going to bring it along this line right here, and I'll actually have both of those selected at the same time. So I'm going to press extrude, and this time I could pull it out that way. I'm just going to press W and just move it straight across here. And I'm just going to do this one vertex at a time here. So I'm just going to just move this straight across there. I'm going to look at my reference. So my reference line is going here. This one's kind of coming up a little bit. So that's kind of our side view. I would like this to be a little more even, but let's see here. I don't see a great way to fix that immediately. Okay, that's not too bad. So I'm going to select these three vertices. Now I'm going to check my top view. I can see it's kind of coming in like that a little bit right there. I think that's looking pretty good. And then whenever in doubt, just kind of switch back to your perspective view. Be sure to keep your camera really active here at all times and just see what this is looking like overall. And so it looks like this vertice could really stand to come back in a little bit. And so this is the front of my car right here, so I'm just having to use my imagination a little bit here. Ideally, you would have a rear image loaded that you can use as reference. And so just notice how active I'm keeping my camera, right? I'm going back and forth between orthographic views. I'm constantly shifting with my perspective view because I'm sculpting, right? And so I need to be able to see this from multiple angles. So I'll press 1 again. And so now let's start kind of building in some new techniques. So I'm going to extrude this edge, and then what I want to show next is the target weld tool. This is a really, really helpful one. So with this edge selected, I'm going to extrude it and pull it around this axis. And so I'm just lining this up, switching between vertex and edge mode. So I've got that lined up in the side view. And let me select both of those vertices. Now I'm going to line them up in the top view up here. So I'm kind of lining that one up, and I'm just getting it kind of close right there. This one kind of lines up right around there. And so the technique I want you to see is, so we have this gap right here. And so whenever you want to close a gap like that, you just, in this mode right here, you right click, go to vertex. I select the vertice that I want to move, and then I press target weld, and then I'm going to drag it to the vertice I want to snap it to, and then they'll be merged into the same vertice. So I just click target weld, click on the vertice that I want to move, drag it onto the vertice I want it to go to, let go, they snap together. And so now if I test it, you can see that they're merged together. So now if I press 3, you can see we have one kind of smooth shape being formed here. And I'm going to kind of keep this tutorial moving, but I could, normally when modeling, I would go through and continue to just kind of fine tune some of these adjustments here. So That's one concept. Let's go ahead and I'm going to start filling in the picture here a little bit more. And so right here, I'm going to select those 3 edges on the top, and I'm going to extrude them so that they come towards the middle of the car. And so I'm just going to press extrude, press W, move them up here. And so my goal here is I'm kind of modeling the car from this side, and I'm trying to bring it back to the center of the world right here. And once I get all these vertices snapped to the center, I'll be able to mirror this across to the other side, and so we only need to mirror half of the car at any given moment. So in order to facilitate that, let's switch back to our top view. And you can see that these are a little bit curved, and I need to get that on axis. So I'm going to right click and go to vertex mode, drag and select right here, press scale, and then again, if I just click this and drag it to the left, that flattens that out for us. And now remember, if I press V, I can snap vertices to other vertices. If I hold X, I can snap vertices to the grid. So I'm holding X, so you can see it snapped it to this grid line, but I want to snap it to that grid line. So I'll hold down X, and you can see this goes into a circle, snap it right there. And from here, I just want to keep these vertices along this world center line right here. And you can see I'm kind of keeping my models really low poly here. I don't think you should make your model much more high poly than what I'm doing, but you might run into some stuff where you need to kind of add some more subdivisions, right? I'm just kind of trying to work a little bit quickly through this so that you can kind of see the whole process coming together. And so that edge right there, it was like that, and I needed to move it up to match both from the top and the side. Remember, we can press 3, see what this model is starting to kind of look like right here. And so now, you know, as you get further along in the car, I can go up and mirror this. So with this model selected, let's say that I'm further along in the model and I wanted to mirror my work over to the other side. Now that that's snapped, and it's really important that I did that step where I snapped it to the center of the world, again with these vertices and holding down X right there. So I select the model and I go to mesh and then mirror. And so for me, I think it'll just mirror right across. If it doesn't do that for you, you might need to switch the axis in which it's mirroring. So mesh, mirror, and then the options box right there. And so here you can choose, you know, maybe it needs to mirror across the Y, the Z axis, or the minus to plus axis right there. So if it's not mirroring for you, try one of those options and just keep pressing Control Z until it works. In my case, again, it's just mesh and mirror right there, and it comes across. And so hopefully you can kind of start to see how this begins to kind of come together over the process. And so I'm just going to press edit on, or no, I'll keep going with this for another second here. And so a really important step right here is that target weld tool. Really, really important. And you can even fix geometry that way. So right here, I'm just going to delete this face. And so if this ever happens or you need to fill in a gap like this, you can use the target weld tool to fill in gaps like that. So to show that, I can just select edge and I'll extrude. And I don't even worry about getting it even close. I can just extrude it like that. And then I can snap this together with the rest of the model just by right clicking and going to vertex mode, clicking on that vertice, clicking target weld, click, and then drag to the vertice you want it to go to. Snaps right there. Same thing here. Click on that vertice, drag it to that vertice using target weld. There we go. Model fixed, right? So that's one way you can fix a model. And something I like to do is I like to press 3 just to double check that nothing weird happened right there. There's another technique you can do to kind of fill gaps as well. And so with that, you can, I'll delete a face again. And so another way is this bridge tool right here. And so the way this bridge tool works is if you select one edge, so I right click, go to edge mode, and I select one edge, hold shift, select another edge so that they're both selected, and then I just press bridge and it'll bring it together. The more square-like your polygon is, the more likely that tool is to work. If you're running into a polygon that's, you know, a little wackier like this one, the target weld might be your better option right there. So just to show that one more time. So if I have a gap like that and I want to fill it, I can right click, go to edge, select this edge, I'll press F to focus on it, and extrude, and I just kind of pull it out any which way because I'm going to weld this together. And I just right click, vertex, select this vertice, target weld, drag like that, target weld and drag like that, just like new. So those two techniques are going to be really important in terms of, you know, bringing this model together. And something else you can do as well is you can start adding edge loops. I recommend holding off for as long as you can before starting to do that. Just try to kind of build the model as simply as you can for as long as possible. But remember that is under Mesh Tools and Insert Edge Loop tool right there. So I'll just break off this Mesh Tools window right here. So Mesh Tools, broke it off. I'll bring it down here. And so the Insert Edge Loop tool, there's some options that you can choose in here. But just traditionally the way this works is if I want a line going this way or a new edge loop going that way, I click on the perpendicular line right there and I can just click and drag and then release. And by default, it's not going to change the geometry at all right there. So I'll just press that and undo to undo that. But something you can do with the Insert Edge Loop is if I click on the options box, I also have the option to insert with edge flow right here. And what that does, let's look at this edge, is if I let it go rip right there, you can see it rounds out the curve. So if you want to create new geometry that kind of rounds out the curve, you can do that. You can see in this instance right here, it rounded out the curve in a way that I don't really like. So I'm just going to press that and undo. So sometimes edge flow is nice, sometimes you don't want it. Right, so that's a button that you can just, again, with the Insert Edge Loop, you can press that option box and kind of bring it on and off. And so one last thing that I want to show here is, remember I have this front wheelbase right here. And so let's go ahead and line that up really quickly with the front of the model. And what I want to show you how to do is how to model kind of from two sides of the car, two areas of the car. And I want to demystify something that might seem challenging at first, which is how do we combine these together into the same mesh between this side and this side. It doesn't need to be too hard. So I'm just going to do this real rapidly here. So normally I would take a little more time to just be a little more careful with, you know, maybe how I'm doing this. And okay, so I have that set up right there. And again, remember, I'm always checking the side view, checking the front view. You can see the anchor point's wrong, right? So I tap D, then I hold down V as in vampire or vertice and snap it right there. And I'll just press W or D to kind of get that off. And now I can kind of move this into position. And so I'm looking at this front angle. Needs to rotate just a little bit. Needs to rotate in. Again, I'm just going to kind of approximate this just a little bit because I want to keep this kind of moving for everybody. Okay, so right here, I'm going to connect this model with this model right here. And you can see my door happens right there. And so what I'm going to do is just with the Insert Edge Loop tool, and again, I'm going to turn Edge Flow on for this. So again, this is under Mesh Tools, the Insert Edge Loop, and again, I'm clicking the options box and clicking that option, Insert with Edge Flow. And so I'm just going to create an edge loop right there, and you can see it rounds it out nicely for me. And then also I'll go back to this model, same idea, and it rounds it out for me. The reason that looks a little bit funky is because I have this other side of the model going. And just for now, I'm just going to get rid of that second side. I don't really need it at this moment. And so that rounds that out for me. And so there's two steps I need to do in order to combine this with this. And so the first step I need to do is I couldn't target weld or bridge between these right now because they're two different models. You see them right here in my outliner. They're two different models. So I need to click on this one, hold Shift, click on that one, press combine. So that just turns them into the same object. You can see now when I click onto one of them, they both get selected, and the outliner, they get combined here. And so I can just call this car 1. And so now I can bridge this gap either using target weld or bridge. So I just right click, go to edge, select on that edge, hold shift, select on that edge, and I can just simply click the bridge button, and now my car is getting connected up here, right? And if I wanted to, hypothetically, bring this edge and connect it with that one, I could use the bridge tool, or I could oops, I had them both selected. I needed to not do that. Or I could use the target weld tool. So right click and go to edge mode, select that edge, extrude, pull it out any which way. I just press Q to get out of that. Right click and go to vertex. And now I select one vertex, target weld, click, snap it, click on that one, snap it right there. And so that's another way you can kind of connect up your model. And if I need more subdivisions in here, well, first I need to press 3, kind of double check how my car's looking, right? It's kind of coming together okay. And if I need more subdivisions, remember you always have the insert edge loop tool right here. So with that, you kind of have all the basic tools that you need in order to get going with modeling your car body. So main tips, toggle between 1 and 3 right here, between smooth and regular. You want to start with these wheelbases right here, and again, starting with those cylinders was a really nice help because it kind of gave me a rounded object to begin with. Keep your geometry really low. Notice that I only have maybe 20 faces right here, and you do not need many more. We can always add more in later as we're building the model out. And be sure to not spend too much time looking at one orthographic view and getting it lined up here, and waiting till you have the model far along before switching your views over to like the top view or something like that. You notice when I was working, each time I made a new set of faces or something like that, I always checked one view and then moved over to another view, double checked it there, and then checked my perspective view. Just check each time from multiple angles every time you introduce a new set of polygons to your model.